Thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday. I am here with Mark Gilbreath from LiquidSpace, CEO of LiquidSpace, who has joined us over the years at DisruptCRE. And I'm really excited to get into today's topic, both drawing from kind of things we've discussed in the past to how it relates to what's going on today. So, hi, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Well, it's snowing outside, which is a bit of a...
Tell us a little bit about where you are. It's pretty unique.
I'm sitting in my office in the town of Ketchum, Idaho. We're at about 6,000 feet in the southern mountains of Idaho. It's a little vacation town called Sun Valley. We're in the schizophrenic period of the year where weather could be on any given day a snowstorm or heat. In fact, literally it's snowing as I look out the window. And it's supposed to be 89 degrees in 3 days. So,
oh my gosh, wow.
But it's damn beautiful, and it's quiet, and it's pastoral, and against the backdrop of a lot of stress, it's sort of nice to be able to look out the window and see a mountainscape.
I believe you. I'm sitting here looking at the city across the street, just to buildings in New York. So
that's a mountainscape. That counts.
No, that sounds lovely, though. Have you been there for the duration the last few months?
Oh yeah. Well, it's home actually. We are one of those companies that did distributed work before it was cool, right? Or before it was a mainstream topic, which of course it has been for the last.
Well, before it was necessary, but it just speaks to kind of your lifestyle. I'm very much the same way, so I totally appreciate that. And what a cool place to be able to work from and call home. And I know you, like me, in our normal lives, we travel a lot. And so it's nice to come back to kind of that quiet place. So, we had you give the keynote talk. I believe it was actually in San Francisco, 2016, I want to say, maybe 2017, but I think 2016. Mm-hmm. And you posed this really, really interesting kind of concept of peak office. And it was super interesting then and made a lot of sense. And I think that we're coming full circle in this moment where no one could have predicted the extremity of today's circumstances. However, we had a panel the other day with a couple others, in the office real estate sector, just talking about retooling, redesigning, what it means to come back into the workforce or into physical spaces in general. But Eric Roseman from Lincoln Property Company made this really interesting statement that across asset classes, office is really this big unknown. We're at the epicenter of the unknown when you talk about office real estate. And almost across all other asset classes, you have a clear value proposition for what those assets will mean to the new world. Everything right from uptick in domestic manufacturing and industrial real estate to, of course, multifamily as we're all hunkered down in our homes. Retail will be reimagined. But, office is this kind of big question mark. So I want you to first start by just introducing yourself and what you do traditionally, and let us know if it's changed at all. And then I'd love to approach those deeper topics.
Yeah, I'd love to. And peak office doesn't seem so crazy anymore, but we'll get to that.
No.
I founded and I run a company called LiquidSpace. And for 9 years, we've been providing the commercial real estate industry and businesses with sort of on-demand real estate technology. The novel idea when we founded and introduced the company at South by Southwest was to, with a mobile app, provide every working employee, every professional with the ability to search, find, and book space with a click, right? And that wasn't such a radical idea in broad terms 9 years ago. People would search, find, and book a hotel reservation, search, find, and book a dinner reservation, search, find, and book toilet paper on Amazon. But it was a radical notion in real estate because real estate was and largely continued to be traded in big long-term lease blocks for fixed amount of space. And furthermore, 9 years ago, when we started the company, there was a very deep sort of cultural precedent of you go to the office to do work. The company provides the office. That is where the work must happen. That is where the culture of the company is forged and protected. And furthermore, for a lot of companies, the more conservative ones, we can't trust that you're working if we don't see that you're in that environment. So we were inspired, remained inspired to turn that thinking on its head, first and foremost because we began with this belief founded in science, which is the work itself is something that's very personal, and the workplace that is best or suitable for every employee is also something very personal. Mark and Marielle may have the very same job, with the very same background, the very same training, but the environment that we're going to thrive in individually, like what means peak performance for us, could be radically different. I might like a buzzy, boisterous environment. You might like a quieter, more secluded environment. I think the truth is probably the opposite of that, for you and I. But the premise was, hey, go find your best space, right? To match the task and the temperament. And rather than a prescriptive workplace where this is your cube, do your best work here. Right? So that was the founding idea. And what we built was a marketplace. We stepped onto the shoulders of many other exciting digital marketplaces that have been delivered in other industries. And we said, listen, let's go create a real-time transactional marketplace where professionals like Marielle can search, find, and book space by the hour or by the day.
Right. Which for a person like me who is, again, not in 2020, but usually traveling quite a bit every few weeks, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And we also purposely were chipping away at something that was largely out of sight and out of mind to the real estate establishment.
Right.
No broker.
Traditionally, for those who don't understand the fundamentals of that, traditionally, folks who need temporary office space, I mean, in the traditional sense, temporary or even short-term office space is, months to up to, let's say, even 3 years. You brought this really radical opportunity for freedom and flexibility, even down to as granular as an hour, which is super cool. But this whole kind of short-term, even temporary leasing aspect of the industry has been totally overlooked. It's been kind of pushed to the wayside. Nobody's prioritized it in a traditional kind of leasing commercial real estate sense. And so over the last few years, we've made this big leap into catering to this collectively underserved aspect of the industry, which is, now we understand very, very powerful, and has really also now turned the heads of some of your larger enterprise tenants to say, well, maybe we don't need to be taking traditional leases and allocating, vast sums of money up front for a long-term commitment that we couldn't possibly predict the future or the outcome of our need. All right, and we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks on this show with some of the tenant perspectives that we've had. Corporate real estate tenants are traditionally taking large percentages of surplus, right, in terms of space for potential unknown growth. Yep. And it hasn't really been super measurable in the past. So we are lucky today in 2020. There's a lot of technology going on helping us with science, measure, understand.
Well, I think that, the CFOs and the real estate planners, the workplace organizations, the brokers that encourage them, up until 2 months ago, I think they were thoughtful and intentional, and they had their analysis and plan that helped them rationalize that 10-year commitment.
Sure.
How quaint. It once seemed reasonable to sign a 10-year lease. It once, not long ago, seemed reasonable to wait a year and a half to have it designed and fitted out.
Right.
It once seemed reasonable to pre-design and prescribe all of the environments inside the space, and it seemed reasonable to require that your employees came into that environment to do their work. An environment, by the way, which had grown increasingly dense by design. to try to eke out the most financial efficiency.
Right.
A lot of those principles now seem rather antiquated, especially in light of recent events.
Right.
And quietly, in fact, in an accelerating way over the last several years, it's become more and more normal for companies and individuals to be thinking about what if I match my real estate spend to the business cycle, right? And the business cycle could be, I have a business task for an hour. I'm going to meet with a client.
Right.
The business cycle, how do I buy that space? The business cycle
Right.
could be, I'm Accenture and I put consultants into a project space for 3 months.
Absolutely. Or it could be even like a law firm that wants to isolate a group, right, to work on a particular, it could be a multitude of case scenarios, but just giving people the option all of a sudden creates that demand is essentially what we've seen happen. Right.
Absolutely.
People say, oh, all of a sudden I can do this function where I wouldn't even consider that as a possibility before. Instead, we'll just all gather at, XYZ person's house or coffee shop or wherever we can squeeze ourselves in. That's not because we can't take a, long-term office.
Yeah. And so, LiquidSpace's origin was, space by the hour by the day, search, find, book, right? And the spaces that were being booked were co-working spaces, serviced office meeting rooms, hotels, libraries, places that had environments that were sort of appropriate for transactionalizing in little tiny slices. And as you and I both sort of touched on, that wasn't terribly threatening to the establishment 9 years ago. But then in recent years, we've expanded the platform to sort of move to the next logical thing, which is slightly longer term space. So not just by the hour, by the day, but an office by the month, or a team suite for multiple months or several years. So we expanded our platform to be able to accommodate those intermediate term transactions that, relative to traditional leasing, the 10-year commitment, are still very much flexible office, but are now solving for bigger and bigger requirements, right? Whether that's a project space for a consulting firm for 3 months or a regional office for a large technology company for 3 years. That spectrum neither of those things, meeting room by the hour, project space for 3 months, regional office for 3 years, none of those scenarios fit within the constraints of the traditional real estate supply chain, long-term lease. But of course, now getting into things like 3-year transactions, this is where the real power of flexibility is starting to come into play. And arguably the center of gravity of real estate and customer need has shifted to far more flexible. And COVID is only turbocharged that.
Yeah, tell me what's been going on with your business. What are you seeing? What are the trends in terms of what people are searching for? Are they searching? Are people looking for office space? Are they, talk to us. What's going on today?
Well, certainly we also shouldn't ignore the headlines because, day by day, week by week, day by day even, the shift in perspective has been extraordinary. Even since that panel that you and I and Eric and Natalie did a few days ago, now the latest sort of shoe to drop is Zuckerberg's announcement from Facebook, right? Which is we'll come back to that perhaps earth-shattering. But what are we seeing? Well, like most businesses that are providing a service that involves the public domain, hotels, airlines, restaurants on Main Street, LiquidSpace, which is essentially turning real estate into an on-demand experience, gravely affected during the COVID shutdowns. So we have two types of transactions that happen in our marketplace, or two types of business need. There's Natalie that needs a meeting room in downtown Manhattan tomorrow at 2:00, right? For an hour to sit down with a couple other colleagues to plan the next DisruptCRE event, right? Hypothetical. If the meeting spaces and offices that provide space by the hour are closed, that business gets shut down. So we've seen that activity during the COVID shutdowns down by 95%. It's essentially on pause. Mm-hmm. The other type of transaction on our platform is Natalie is the corporate real estate manager at XYZ Enterprise, or Natalie is the CEO of the growing company, and she needs to be planning out what her next office is going to be to add add service to Chicago, or she needs a swing space because her construction project was delayed due to COVID, but she needs an office for a month or 6 months or a year. Those types of transactions are still happening. Through COVID, like the commerce never stopped in our platform. It's down significantly, but it never stopped.
Interesting.
Large and small transactions. Now, there is an interesting new signal that was always there, but it's grown in magnitude. And that has been an inrush of enterprise employees booking small offices.
Enterprise employees booking, so like individuals taking it upon themselves.
Individuals taking
I understand that so much.
Yeah, so I'm a senior exec at a financial services firm. My corporate headquarters is shut down. My apartment or home, wherever that might be, isn't viable.
Right.
I'm going to search, find, and book an office on month-to-month basis for myself.
Right.
There's a blossoming of that, and I think that's that is a precursor of the larger phenomena of employees being given choice and the workplace becoming somewhat more distributed, which I think are what a great many predictions and announcements from people like Mark Zuckerberg all sort of point to. We're moving into a stage that's very, very different than where we've been in terms of the typical thinking on what workplace is. We're moving aggressively now toward more distributed.
Well, it's interesting too, right? And as you talk about more distributed, I think about even here in New York City, even before COVID came, and did its thing to all of our lives, there's been a tremendous amount of empty retail spaces. I've noticed, I'm sure many know to be true here in New York City, and I'm sure around the nation. And we're only going to see more and more empty retail locations as many businesses, unfortunately, will not be able to recover and come back. And so, I have considered, even reaching out to some of the retailers downstairs, the brokers who, many of them I know just, through my job and what I do, and trying to understand if they are willing to lease those spaces for individuals. Many of them are little small retail shops here where I am down in the West Village, but I'm sure across the city, there's a lot of different types of just empty retail spaces sitting there. And it will be interesting to see if some of your traditional assets start converting into potentially, like you said, executive suites, maybe even hotel rooms. It will be interesting to see potentially new uses for real estate as people will struggle, especially in densified cities where most buildings are vertical and we have this challenge with elevators and space, to seek more creative uses of space just to be outside of their home, right? To have a dedicated space to be productive. But I had considered retail as just again, it's in my face. I see it, it's sitting empty. And you do have some of these logistical issues, Wi-Fi and security and things like that. Cleaning, right? There's no facility person that's coming to clean that space. So if it's only you, that's okay. But if you're deciding to add a coworker or something like that maybe lives in the same area, you start entering some phases of challenge.
But those things are solvable. Like what do I need in this space? Those are solvable. But what you observe, I think, is the big opportunity. Like you look at that ground floor retail space and you see the bones of it, right? It's got an outside door. I don't have to get in an elevator to go through it. You see that it's sitting empty, and because you live in the neighborhood that it's been empty for 2 years.
Right.
So you presume that there's a perishing asset there. You look at the scale of it. It's 1,000 square feet. That could comfortably encompass 4, 5, 6 people. And so you see what I would sort of frame as a rebuilding opportunity. All right.
Reimagination.
Opportunity. And furthermore, you're looking at it like we all are to a degree through the lens of, or I might suggest, you're looking at it with a current lens of health and safety and COVID response, right? And so we're contemplating, the playbooks are all being written about how we're going to re-enter the corporate campus, the 6-foot office, and people are furiously trying to figure out how we're going to make elevators and even a practicality to get people up to the 50th floor.
Right. That's not even approaching kind of how do you get to the building even in the first place, which is why we will see more of this distributed space, because even if the workplace itself is safe, Are you getting on a subway? Are you getting in an Uber? Are you driving? Depending on where you are and lucky enough to drive, that's a a no issue. But transportation is a big problem right now.
Yeah, so like we're all hunkered down at home right now. 95% of knowledge workers are working from home at the present time, and we're preparing to, and some are beginning to move into early reentry. We've all sort of hacked out an existence. You and I are getting her done, from home. Everyone is, right? And it's surprised a lot of leaders and managers, employees that they've been able to.
Yeah.
Even conservative companies have sort of come out and declared. Morgan Stanley's sort of the first shot heard around the world when James Gorman came out and said, look, we're all working from home right now and we've had no issues. Clearly, we're going to need less real estate.
Right.
That was 3 weeks.
We've heard a lot of enterprise tenants talk in this way. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, it comes down to the CFO. Everyone has to kind of buckle down and cut costs where they can. They have to. So real estate is a natural, especially because it's working for everybody to work from home. Now we know that's not going to be an indefinite solution. People do need space to be productive, to be collaborative, to share energy and exchange information. We're lucky enough to have some of these tools at our disposal to do some of that digitally, but you can't replace it goes back to the old handshake at a real estate conference. You can't replace the relationship building of feeling somebody's energy in person and their, who they are and what they're bringing to the table. Now, it might look a little bit different. Are we shaking hands anytime soon? No. Are we going to real estate conferences anytime soon? Probably not. So it will look a lot different. But I think I want to come back to kind of your predictions and kind of your talk for peak office. Can you talk about some of the core principles from the lens back in 2016, 2017, and what your intentions were with that talk? Because it really was like this aha moment, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'd done this TEDx talk, and I called it Peak Office in the Age of Unbuilding. And
show this.
The math at that time, like, the real estate math was, look, or the stuff that sort of rose off the page for me, we've got at the time approximately 20%. Yeah, here's the link to the TEDx. We've got at the time 4 years ago, I think we had approximately 20% vacancy across office as a category. So we got that. That's a non-trivial chunk of capacity. On top of that, we were midway down a path of densifying the office. 20 years ago, the norm was about 300 square feet per person. 4 years ago when I did that talk, numerous companies had already adopted densification strategies and had shown that 150 square feet per person, 110 square feet per person, they're able to create vibrant work environments. But broadly speaking, most companies 4 years ago were still in the 200 to 250 square feet per person realm. And so, looking at the math, we had 20% vacancy. The supply pipe was still driving hard to bring more capacity online. Yet, looking inside the offices, we were growing more dense, meaning we're going to be able to put more people into space. And then furthermore, the dirty little secret, even as we were madly making offices more dense and trying to convert them to be more efficient from a financial standpoint, the dirty little secret remained that most offices were largely underutilized. Few, if any, offices that had implemented workplace sensing technologies were finding that they were ever more than 50% occupied during the working day. So you add all that up. I have vacancy. I've got growing supply coming into the pipe. Workplace design programs are shifting ever more toward densifying. And even with all of that, I've got low utilization of the office because more and more employees are spending more and more of their time working somewhere other than the office part of the time. So I rolled all that up, against this question rather than a prediction. Might there be a period of peak office? Because the data and the trends suggested that we were aggressively headed toward oversupply. Now, no one had imagined a world-changing event like COVID at that time. But again, this question of might we see peak office, just as we have seen peak various other things over the sweep of history. And then the sort of companion question or the companion topic that I threw to it was, if we are approaching peak office, like if there's going to be a wake up moment at some point where we realize, oh, we've overdone it, what then happens? What needs to happen? Well, it's your observation about that ground floor retail underneath your apartment in the East Village. We need to be thinking about rebuilding or unbuilding that built landscape.
Right.
And the overarching imperative around that is the even larger invisible enemy that we are all fighting. I mean, we can talk about COVID as this invisible distributed enemy that's given the world this shared experience, right? Yes, it's all those things. But the larger, but COVID will pass. We'll have a vaccine, hopefully, and hopefully sooner than later, it will pass. And there may be other novel viruses that we encounter, but they too will pass. But the larger invisible enemy is this arc of climate change, and the implications to this planet are dire.
Yeah,
and
people are saying that.
Yeah, and the carbon footprint, contribution, the energy absorption of the built landscape, it's the biggest lever.
It's one of the reasons that I got into this space to begin with, Mark. It's I think really an astounding thing when people can first discover that about our industry. And I think it reshapes a lot of the conversation from what's the coolest technology to what's the most impactful technology. And it's not just the technology is an extension of the functions that we're looking to accomplish. And I talk about this a lot, right? We have really very high level technologists that are working on solutions for the built environment. So if we make that a priority and not doing the coolest front-facing marketable thing, but rather the thing that levels us off to a place of efficiency so that we're not wasting so much, I think that's a responsibility we all have if we're in this commercial real estate tech, prop tech, whatever you want to call it. If we're in this space, it is something that needs to be kind of front and center. And I try hard to kind of reframe the conversation as such often, because I get this question all the time: what's the coolest technology? What's the next big disruption? We haven't seen very many kind of Uber, Airbnb, WeWork type of disruptors, coming up into the space quite yet, but those are not necessarily, we don't need that big disruption. We need incremental changes for a goal that we share to mitigate waste. It's a gross amount of waste.
I think your last statement sort of begs the question: why haven't we seen more sweeping technology-enabled transformation of real estate? And I would suggest that some part of it,
shed light on that.
Some part of the answer lies with the sort of the entrenched power and strength and inertia around kind of the established way. Like, we'll call it the establishment. Right.
And the established way performs very well, right? They do well, especially when the market is good. And so it's difficult to.
Well, it depends on your measures, right? If you're a broker in New York City, or an institutional asset investor in New York City, those are two hats of the establishment, or a real estate attorney in New York City. Mm-hmm. If you have been monetizing that establishment model in New York, most major metros, yeah, it's been a great, extraordinarily lucrative business to be in. But the curtain's been pulled back. Like the music has stopped, at least temporarily, on that, and the cracks in the foundation of that model have been exposed. That is not a resilient model. That is not an agile model that can adapt or pivot quickly.
Right.
All the companies that are sitting on 10-year leases right now in New York City with offices that were already underutilized and are now empty.
Grossly underutilized.
And businesses and those occupiers have businesses that need to shift and adapt now because their economics have radically changed.
Right.
And the one thing on their balance sheet or the one thing on their P&L that they can't move nimbly on is real estate.
Right.
So all the brokers that made the extraordinary commissions and the attorneys that drew the fees and the institutional owners that put enormous amounts of capital behind this model, the music has stopped, at least temporarily. And I think the question is, has the tune changed? I think the tune has changed.
Well, I think the tune has been changing, and it just really took this moment in time for people to realize the effect on their businesses, right? And the business model. And so when you look back 20, 30 years ago, when people, the psychology was you go to work, you hope to be in the same job in your career, right? In your career, climbing up a ladder for life, right? There's this mentality shift and cultural shift now into these next generations where you're not going to get a job after college and hope that that job will stay with you that you'll be there for the rest of your life, right? You expect to change and change often and learn and almost discover what your interests are as it relates to the world around you. And because of that, we, these younger generations have an expectation of change over lifetime. Right. And we see it play out really significantly with technology evolution. Technology, because of how quickly it changes our society and our culture, therefore, with it. And these changes are coming more quickly and more significantly than humans have seen before. And therefore, this whole kind of mindset and kind of cultural need that we experience when going to work or being productive is no longer rooted in going to the same physical place every day, right? And so I think it's a big cultural change that's happened over the last few decades, that all of a sudden we woke up in real estate and we said, oh, well, people's business models are changing, their mindset is changing. Tenants fundamentally are requiring a totally new playbook. Okay, now as the shareholders of a portfolio, we can talk about how does that reflect on our goals, on our priorities, right? We may not have had a sustainability initiative before, or we may have been, LEED certified or whatever it is, but we haven't, considered deeply the day-to-day function of the individuals coming to work in our building, more than just the design and the layout of a space, right? And now fundamentally, we as humans need so much more out of a place, especially as we're coming back into the workplace. So we talked about this a little bit the other day in terms of amenitization. Amenities obviously have been on the uptick in office buildings over the last 10 years, or maybe even last 5 years. We've seen this drastic, kind of uptick. We borrowed from what luxury multifamily is doing well, what hospitality is doing well. But all of a sudden, if you're asking us as an employer or as an enterprise company to come into a physical space, or the landlord is saying to the tenant, it's okay to bring your people back, all of a sudden it's a totally new handbook. We need so many more things. Obviously, public safety comes into question as like the number one thing on the board. But as we're talking about, maybe schools are open, maybe they're not open. Now everyone's responsible for their kids day to day as well as their job. Are we giving them a place to bring their kids safely now to this physical space because they can't leave them at home? What are we doing, right? Transportation will change what we need from a built environment and the landscape of what that looks like. So a couple days ago in our talk, we talked about the Twitter headquarters and how they've made this statement that we're going to give our employees an option indefinitely to work from home, but they're also not downsizing their HQ. And that's super interesting. So they're not saying we need less space because of that decision. I have a lot of feelings about it, but let's hear what you have to say.
That's the headline.
Yeah.
And I think there's we have to sort of parse the words. And I'll take all of the words as fact and sincere, but let's parse them. They've declared that for many or most employees, we're going to allow you the permanent privilege of work from home if you want to.
Right.
I think that was a relatively radical statement 2 weeks ago when Jack made it. It's becoming like we're moving in dog years now. Like it.
Right. It doesn't just say to their employees our intentions. It really says to the world. Like they really decided.
The Twitter sphere has been told that this is now an okay thing.
Right.
So I take that at face value, and there's a growing herd of people that are jumping in behind that. Again,
right.
Zuckerberg and Facebook essentially echoing that.
Right. They gave permission.
Yesterday. So that's one statement. The other was, we're not going to downsize our headquarters. Like the office will still be there if you want to come, which I think is also, I agree. Office will be there if you want to. There will always be Twitter office.
Yeah.
Right. There will always be Twitter office. And I think that is smart and vital. Like, even companies like ours and Automatic and others that have been fully distributed as a philosophy recognize the criticality of coming together in place periodically to forge a deeper professional culture. There's no way that Zoom alone can create the bonds and the trust
right.
amongst employees
right.
That is needed for a team to execute. Now you can have a fully distributed team and arrange for that coming together and that forging with shorter term space. We've demonstrated that. Others have too. Twitter said there will always be a Twitter office to come to. I think the misread might be to take that as saying we will never have less office than we do right now. Right? We will never downsize our corporate office.
Right. I don't think that was the intention.
But I think people are reading that in. There's the two camps. There's the people rallying for, work from home, the office is dead. And then there's the people that are rallying for, the office isn't dead. You're an idiot if you think that people won't want to come back. My prediction would be whenever Twitter's lease term on market in San Francisco comes up, I don't know whether that's next year or 10 years from now, that they'll, like any smart company, they'll look to see how much of that are we using, how much do we still need.
Right.
And
we can measure now with technology utilization of space, where maybe in the past we haven't had that option.
Yeah, and Twitter's office in San Francisco was sized for a time and a culture and a set of beliefs when they expected most people to come to that office. And right. when the next opportunity for them to revisit that strategy comes up, which will be before or near the end of the current lease term, they're a smart company. They're data driven. They're going to look at what their needs are. Will they keep all of that space in San Francisco? Will they make it smaller? Will they move toward a distributed network of hubs, as Facebook has just declared they're going to do? No one can know how they'll act in the future, but I would predict that the answer is yes. To me, the pattern looks rather clear. Head office is going to get smaller. Corporate headquarters are going to get smaller. Corporate, company real estate portfolio as a whole will get smaller relative to the number of employees. Space per person will continue to trend down, and even faster. Will office go away? Of course not. There are a myriad of tasks where office for employees to gather or do individual work will be required.
Yeah,
it's going to become more efficient. Let's applaud. We're taking steps toward actually making progress against that larger threat.
No, I think it's a beautiful time for this kind of like reimagination and taking a hard look at our priorities as both humans, as companies, the things that we want to embody just today, but also moving forward into the future. I look definitely at this as an opportunity, and every single day I have startup founders or just interesting people who have interesting ideas propose just really interesting ideas, new businesses, innovations, creativity that I think, we've had it, but it's kind of sparked this new energy, kind of this new newfound excitement for being creative and retooling. I really believe that left to our own devices as humans, human beings, we're resilient, and we're going to come back with solutions and interesting approaches. So I believe that wholeheartedly.
Mariela, you've been preaching disrupt for what, 5 years, 6 years?
6 years.
Right. And have built a deep network and talked to folks up, down, left, right across this industry.
Yeah.
What's your perspective now? Are we moving into a period of greater disruption, or are we moving into a period of retrenchment? Like what, like, you know, if disrupt was a stock symbol or a commodity you could buy or trade, is the share price of Disrupt, not the company, but the principle, is it up? Neutral?
Well, I'll start by saying the word disrupt, and I've actually had this conversation with a few people recently. It's been a while since I've talked about the intention behind the word disrupt as it relates to the commercial real estate industry, but it's really disruption in the most positive way, just symbolizes change, right? And so naturally, it's a moment to embrace change, and not only just embrace the changes, some of it is within our control, some of it we have to just surrender to the fact that, you know, this is life right now and we have to embrace the change.
Right.
I believe strongly that in the last few years, or since I've been doing this, that there's been a strong resistance to change, just in general. And again, the market's been treating us well in commercial real estate. I mean, I mostly based here in New York, but I travel the country, and you know, there's been a lot of resistance to change. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever you're bringing to the table, it's like, no, we're coming back to the old way. We're coming back to what we know works, the tried and true way. But as we're entering this whole new world, it's like almost like an alternate reality that all of us find ourselves now living and breathing and making a life in. I think that people are forced to maybe not embrace, but accept change. Our priorities are changing entirely as human beings. It's a moment where people are revisiting kind of the strength and beauty and necessity of human connection. I think the value of that has increased so much. And so I think because of that, that will change how we value connections and interconnectivity with others coming back to work, but also coming back to school, you know, shopping, learn every aspect of the built environment that, you know, hospitals, every aspect of the built environment is going to have to be reimagined. And I see it as a tremendous opportunity. And so I think that it's a moment where a lot of those people who have been afraid of changes, or just frankly, they know it's not for them, and that's okay. They're enjoying, you know, we had some articles in the last couple of weeks. People are enjoying the fruits of their labor over the last many years. They've have great careers, and now they're, you know, reimagining their time to do something else. But they don't want to embrace the tech stack, which is totally fine. But then you have a lot of others that are more poised for maybe learning a new skill, but just being open, right? They're more open than they ever have.
I agree.
All right, jump in.
Yeah, no, I think it was Newton who said, "Give me a big enough lever and I can move the earth," right? And I think it was Newton. We'll have to look it up. But for 50 plus years, the commercial real estate, again, we'll call it the establishment. I don't mean that as a derogatory, but just that collection of interests. They've been this immovable force. It's been so profitable. It's been well established. They were so entrenched that they disruption didn't offer them anything.
Right.
But there are now, I think, here in COVID, two very clear, massive levers that are sort of both working on the same fulcrum, and I think they're going to tip commercial real estate off of that foundation. They're going to put it on a new path.
One of the levers.
And those two levers have never worked in unison before. One of those, but they're interesting allies. One of those levers is, you know, the CFO, CEO of most companies now, who are seeing the extraordinary, or they're facing economic threat to their companies, but they're seeing an extraordinary opportunity to bring more financial efficiency to their real estate.
Right.
I mean, you know, the CFOs at Barclays and Morgan Stanley and Facebook and Google and Twitter, they're all looking at what the cash saving opportunities are of less real estate. And moreover, they're declaring their intentions now. Gartner just came out this week with a survey of SMB CFOs. 74% said that they were downsizing their portfolios. And in particular, they also referenced directly substantial increase in distributed work or work from home along with that. That's sort of the how. Like we're going to squeeze the portfolio down. We're going to see 5 to 20% of our employees working from home or distributed. So you got the CFO in the game now. He's got a big lever. He's not going to or he or she are not going to let go of that lever. We're on that path. The other lever is it's you and I and all of us employees who've been working somewhere other than the office for the last 8 weeks. And certainly for some of us, that's been a marginal experience, right?
Right.
So some are outright unhappy and they're going to want to go back to some office, whether that's a flexible office, whether that's a headquarters. They'll want to go back for sure, 100%. Some portion are mostly happy though, right? They like wow, I've saved 90 minutes of commute every day. I'm actually able to do my focused work more effectively, but periodically or episodically, I want something else. So I need to get together with colleagues periodically. And then there's a third group that are just completely happy. Like home is working. I don't need anything else, right? So you've got the interests of the employees saying, I don't want to let go of this new pattern, right? Behavior change, by science, takes somewhere on the order of 60 days or so for a new pattern to lock in. We will have spent at least 2 months, if not 6 to 9 or 12 or more, in a forced experiment to learn new behaviors. Yeah. And for some, it will have been a positive one. So that's a lever too. You got the employees, some who want to work differently. You got the CFOs that are looking to reduce expense. Those two things are in alignment. Those two things lead us to different workplace, less corporate campus, still important, but a smaller workplace.
Well, I think, right, like we were saying before too, it's what is the intention now coming to a physical space? There has to be more purpose than an activity that we can accomplish at home. So is it a collaborative environment that we need to be able to physically talk to each other? Is it a place where, we need to maybe even just be by ourselves because our home environment is not conducive to that? You have kids, you have family, whatever it is. So just allocating a separate space from where you live is important. It is important. We all feel that. I mean, I've been working from home, which just means working from wherever I happen to be because it's always different every other week, for 6 years. Right. And the offices and the built environment that I get to enjoy are the cool spaces that for my clients. I work in all kinds of interesting buildings around the country, hosting conferences, hosting events. But I work from wherever I happen to be, even if it's on a train platform or in an airport or whatever it is. Yeah. Right. And so and you're giggling over there because I know you feel the same. I know you get it.
Yeah. Well, it's such an intentional, right? Like I was chatting with Jervis Tompkins at Gensler earlier this week, and he'd sort of thrown that phrase out at me. He goes, Mark, because he's hopeful and excited, I think, that this is an opportunity. Like there's the opportunity, not the guarantee, that workplace becomes something intentional.
Yes.
And he posed 2 other questions, like who should come back? Like we're all clamped down, but who should come back? And for what purpose?
Right.
Like what are the activities that are going to draw them back to the office? The tasks that need something that home doesn't fulfill or the train station doesn't fulfill. Right. For some, it might be just a place to work every day. For others, it might be collaboration. But there's the opportunity to thoughtfully create the workplaces that serve those tasks much more intentionally. And that's a very different approach to the built landscape than where we came from, which was, of course, everybody comes to the office. We'll build a lot of office. We'll decide what it should look like. And it's uniform, by the way. Oh, you're a junior employee, you get this cube. Oh, you're a senior partner, you get this corner office.
Or the hot desking, which is
that's an asset-driven approach. So imagine a world where we over time rebuild the built landscape. We do it in a way that is intentional, reflecting the needs of the individuals. We do it against the backdrop of sustainability as an imperative, financial efficiency as a requirement that every company is now feeling. That could be a better place.
So it's a crazy moment to think about. And if you take a Twitter HQ type of scenario, or you can imagine any big tech company out in, over in the West Coast with a headquarters, we went truly from overly amenitized, come to work, but also we have events, we have social aspects, we have wellness things, we have a snack room, we have lunch, we have anything, we're farming bees up on the roof. If you've ever been to the Airbnb HQ, right? It's super, super interesting. So we went from that extreme to now nobody's in the office, to now coming back and looking at this massive amount of space, some office, some recreational, some lifestyle, right? But it was all there. We all needed it, especially in this past recent era of chief happiness officers and HR having more of a hand in curating a workplace. And it's more about catering to humans and what people...
And a generation of employees who don't know how to cook because they got breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the office.
And why would they? That's awesome, right? And so part of creating a workplace was also speaking to the company culture. What do we want to say as a company? Why are you going to come choose to work for us, Twitter, versus, them, Google, or whoever, right? And so we went from that place to all of a sudden, workplace becomes not only a liability to bring people back. Not only is it not a perk, right, of being an employee of XYZ company, but it's really a liability of where we have to take public safety and that individual safety and garner their trust in such a serious, significant way that even for, and not only just our employees, but it's our responsibility to the greater, county, nation, really the country as a whole, to make sure that our employees are safe and we're not creating an environment that's reckless to the current state of the country, right, to the world, but this public health crisis. And so all of a sudden, we talked a little behind the scenes about this, and you're one of the few people I feel like we can maybe get into this conversation, even though there's only a few minutes. We can we can keep going if we need. But all of a sudden, from an infrastructure standpoint, because of that liability and that responsibility, we will see kind of technology implemented for things like contact tracing, for measuring people's temperature, to measure if they're coughing and sneezing entering the building, to measure if there's too much of a densification in a particular area. Are there too many people in this area? We need to break it up, right? Or and then maybe that whatever technology, it's a sensor, it's a camera, whatever it is alerting a security guard or a community manager to take action. And actually, for those of you who are watching, we have a super interesting segment next week with a couple of physicians that have partnered with a technology company to do just this. So I've been getting to learn a lot about some of the logistics of how this will play out. And I think as humans, we're going to have to decide to waive some of our personal right to privacy in order to re-enter the workplace responsibly. And I don't think there's one kind of right or wrong answer or feeling about this. But it's a really interesting conversation. I'm really excited to have it next week and hear what those guys have to say. But I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of this borderline right to privacy, but also public safety.
And we're a country that is
we value it so much.
Yeah, the liberty and privacy are these sort of inalienable rights.
Right.
I think so many aspects of this topic. It'll be a great chat you have next week. Like I think it's quite likely that we will be moving maybe quickly toward ceding, giving up some of our digital sovereignty.
Yeah.
And in some ways, if we looked in the last 10 years in the emergence of occupancy sensing technologies, they were, in terms of the employee experience or perception, those technologies up until recently have engendered a lot of distrust, pushback. Right.
Nobody wants that big brother feeling like.
Yeah, the story of the sensor being ripped off the chair or out from underneath the desk because the employee doesn't want big brother watching him, and because there's a resentment that this is about taking something away from me or tracking my work. Tracking
the productivity, I think, is a big part of it.
But there is the opportunity now, though, to legitimately, authentically, empathetically reframe what this technology is trying to do, which is maintain the safety of an environment.
Well, right now it's a whole different ballgame in terms of intent. So we went from kind of the perspective of, I don't want my building or my company watching my every move. I don't want them tracking my productivity, to all of a sudden, wow, I might not feel safe unless they do that, right? To know if somebody got sick last week, did I come in contact with them? I might not know, but that camera knows, right? Or that sensor knows, or that artificial intelligence system that my building is now equipped with. They know exactly who that person came in contact with.
That's right. I hope that, look, I'm of the mind that we in this country desperately need more systems in place to combat this current temporary enemy. We need tracking, we need tracing, we need isolation. Yeah. We need a systematic and coordinated approach to that. We've not had that yet. And if it, hopeful, if and as those systems and that coordinated approach come into being, it will need to involve in layers that exist within the work environment, because that's where a lot of people do spend a lot of time. So that's going to be important.
Right.
On the flip side, though, I do think that during the re-entry period, let's define that as from now up until the point when the threat of Corona-19 is no longer here, which is going to be either when we have herd immunity or we have an effective vaccine adequately deployed. Until that time, which I think is going to be at least 12 months. I mean, even if we have a vaccine in 6 months, which would be extraordinary,
that would be amazing.
It's going to take time for that to be deployed.
Sure.
So if we had 12 more months, I look at all of the scrambling going on right now around playbooks for 6-foot offices and replumbing the way the work environments look and putting up split screens and no-touch processes. Like, all of those things are needed and appropriate.
Right.
Like, if people are going to go and cohabitate these environments, yeah, that you have to do that. But the thing that feels contrived to me is this presumption that people will actually choose to put themselves in those environments. Like, what will your emotional experience be to do good work, to be in flow, if getting to the place where you're going to try to do good work, whatever that is, whatever your job is, you have to pass through and even sit in an environment where you're wearing a mask and there is red tape on the floor and you've got all of these visual cues that are reinforcing this signal of there's threat, be alert. I just don't, like, psychically.
You brought up this is such an interesting point, because we talk about kind of the new amenities and new things that people are going to have to offer to tenants and individuals to make them feel safe. Like, is an on-site therapist going to be one? Are people going to have PTSD, like returning to the office from like getting on the subway and doing all of those functions of getting to their physical workplace every day?
Yes, and I think you're going to see on-site medical staff. I think that's going to be one of the. And so yeah, maybe home isn't ideal, and I'm not out trying to preach that the world should just shift to working from home forever. I'm not saying that's anything optimal, but there will be individuals who say, all right, home's got these characteristics, and then the reentry workplace has all of these.
What is office bringing to the table that is more valuable than right now working from home? And I think that's such an interesting, we didn't go down that path in our last conversation with the panel. But I think that's super interesting. Even if we're able to make our buildings extremely safe from an air quality standpoint, a filtration standpoint, a AI sensor standpoint that's tracking you and making sure that you're not coming in contact with other people and all the things, if we make it safe, is it valuable enough for somebody to spend that 90 minutes commuting every day there and back, or 30 minutes or 15 minutes, or right? Are those things worth it?
And think about I pity the corporate real estate manager, pity the building owner investor who they've got a really challenging set of decisions to be making. Like, on one hand, you have to put the capital into these various efforts. If you're the building owner, you've got to be auditing your air quality filtration systems. You've got to be looking at capital improvements to make the buildings even viable in this current world. If you're the workplace leader, you've got to be putting in place these playbooks. But there's this big unknown of how big does your workplace need to be next month, next year, 2 years from now?
I mean, yeah, 2 years from now, who knows? And I think that's one of the things that it's super interesting. And we're a little bit more equipped today in 2020 to make these changes. But it doesn't seem that likely that people could make investments today for 2 years from now, outside of the basics that we know we need: air quality filtration and monitoring, sensors, building sensors. Once we do it, we can't go back. Can't take it back, right? You open that Pandora's box, you can't take it back. All of a sudden, we are capturing people on camera. I mean, before COVID, you had building sensors, occupancy sensors, but the intent was just to analyze utilization. It wasn't to find out exactly who's in that building and for how long and who they were in contact with. Now you come with a totally different intention from a tech stack. We need to monitor exactly who's in the building, for how long, who they came in contact with, what door handles they touched, the whole thing. And so coming back, I can't see people, building owners, making investment right now and spending capital on permanent infrastructure outside of the basics of what they have to do, because there is this unknown, and the value of those assets ultimately will come back. We will be back in office buildings. This won't be life forever, but in the immediate, how do they make those temporary solutions enough? How can they do enough for us to find value in coming to a place beyond just our employers saying this team is coming back to work on X date?
Well, so what's the market going to want? What's going to pull people out? And I think
what do they want?
Well, open plan, 20,000 square foot floor plate that's going to accommodate 200 people, 400 people. That's not going to be wanted.
Can't even imagine that would happen.
The private space for 10 or 20, more viable, right? Like, so I think in the near and the short term, yes, asset owners are going to be shifting toward, space providers will be shifting toward reformatting the product to better align with the practicalities of what people are going to be willing to spend money on right now. And I think I think what in the near term we can confidently say will be needed in light of all this is places to come and collaborate and team build.
Distributed offices, for sure.
Hubs and spokes, right? But probably more private environments, probably smaller scale rather than large campuses. And I think you can already start to see the aspects of existing buildings and operators that are more relevant. Like, things like spec suites that in the past were built out as the leftovers, I think now have the opportunity to become something very, very strategic. Space for 10, 20, 30 people are hyper relevant now. And so who knows, 5 years from now, that might be 50% of what a building allocation looks like. A lot of thoughtfully considered but smaller team spaces rather than the massive sort of featured HQ location that presumes everyone's going to want to come and coexist there.
Well, I think we also are entering this moment where people are, like I said on the panel the other day, we've had this really mass exodus out of New York City, and I can imagine a lot of other major metros. I'm watching it every day. Even now, people are moving out downstairs on every block, on the corner of every block. So all of a sudden, people are deciding, okay, I live here because I work here and I go to my office and I see my friends and my family and I have a life here. All of a sudden, all of that is stripped away, and now I can live anywhere. And my company has, security in place for me to work, on the company system, wherever I need to be. Or you're like you and I, and, we can go wherever we need to be. And all of a sudden people say to themselves, wow, I don't need to pay all of this money to live in New York City or live in San Francisco or wherever I live because of my job. I can live in Idaho or in Maine or in wherever I feel like, and my company will support that. And so does that need to change? People are about to get really comfortable with that in the next couple of years. Are we going to now come back to major metros and to these, 70-story buildings that, you have to get in an elevator every day and take a train to get in, and all of a sudden maybe parking lots have to become a thing again here in the city, right?
Here's the thing, we can't know, right? But the hopeful outlook is that the truth will reveal itself, and the truth lives with you and with me and in the individuals, because companies are giving people choice. And now that they have choice,
right now,
am I going to stay in Manhattan or move to Cleveland? Am I going to go to the office or work from home? Now we give the people the choice, and they will start to demonstrate the new patterns. They'll wear the they'll wear the walking paths into the sod, into the earth, and we'll then see what how the built landscape should respond and conform to that.
Right.
And it will be a more honest built landscape.
You're totally right. We'll just kind of have to wait to see what people do. I mean, we're seeing it again. I'm seeing it outside. We're seeing some of what's happening kind of in this still early stages of this kind of moment in human history, if you will, right? Even though we're all pretty sick of it at this point, and we wish we could resume life as it was, but maybe for some people not. I mean, I think that this is bringing a lot of interesting things and considerations and purposefulness and creativity to the table. And so while we'd never wish this were happening, I think that it's important, at least from my perspective, and I think you share this perspective, that there is a lot of opportunity and positive outcomes to be had still yet to come. And so that's very exciting.
Yes.
I want to just pull up, I had grabbed over from your blog. Let's see if I can make this a little bit better. I had grabbed over from your blog just some of the recent things that you posted. I would love to share. I'll share the link to your blog in the comments afterwards. But are there any things that you feel like you want to let people know about, or
well, there's a lot of I mean, the blog channels, the webinar feeds have certainly been they've been flush lately. There's a lot of content being pushed out there, and a lot of it's up at the what's going to happen strategy level. I think selfishly, one point that I would like to get across to the audience, and for those companies and occupiers amongst them, these ideas of supporting distributed employees and providing access to flexible space and doing so in a way that is managed and controlled and effective for employee and company. We can see the need of that now. Like, all my employees are working from home. How do I augment that? Gosh, I wish there was a solution that could do that. Well, the reality is there have been like, we have a platform that does that. There have been companies that have been, like Genentech, with whom I did a webinar yesterday, that have been demonstrating those principles at scale for years now. And so to those workplace leaders or managers that are scrambling to sort of figure out how can they support Marielle, who's trapped at home right now and needs something other than home. LiquidSpace is rising to that challenge. We've built the world's largest network of on-demand space, whether it's supporting Marielle with offices or meeting rooms by the hour or by the day, or whether it's finding that project space or swing space to tide you over while COVID delays your normal projects, or whether it is moving in a more fulsome way to regional offices and hubs on more flexible terms. All those things have been happening for quite some time, and they're actionable.
Okay, wait, now I have two more questions.
Right.
Okay, one is, do you see a new kind of inventory coming into your platform? Not necessarily today, but do you see down the road potentially like repurposed retail space, all kinds of things? Sorry.
Yes and yes, right? So, peak office, age of unbuilding. What does unbuilding mean? Well, like I've got a meeting next week with a large institutional owner that's got 60 retail locations up and down the West Coast that are specifically looking at abandoned, unused retail storefront space, and they want to understand the viability of that space for work purposes. And I think that's the tip of the iceberg of an opportunity there.
Sure.
It's horizontal real estate, not vertical real estate. It's got, and the bones of that are very timely. Now they'll have to address things like, how should it be fitted out? What type of work would want to get done in that environment? Who could design that for me? How can I furnish it? What technology should be in it? But the concept of transactional real estate, retail, flexible on-demand real estate, available in the past were retail environments, I think has huge legs. We've been having conversations with a large hotel chain that is seeing the relevance of its hotel rooms as individual work environments, right? And so that may blossom as hotels look to hack their way to viability in a time when people aren't traveling as much for business, right? So that's a possibility. Companies with excess space, right? So all of those companies who have employees that are working from home right now and are thinking about downsizing their fixed real estate, but have months or years left on their terms, subletting is a challenging task for for companies, that inventory has been coming to LiquidSpace as well. You know,
Right.
sharing space by the desk by the month, right? So I think we're in the early stages of a renaissance period of us sort of figuring out, all right, what do we do with all this stuff that we've built? And
all of a sudden, this huge asset class becomes totally available.
It's a great time for architects. It's a great time for designers, but we got to learn some new strokes, right? We got to find the new rhythms and the new systems to make repurposing of the built landscape practical, economically rewarding to all the constituents, and in line with what the planet needs it to be and what the workers want it to be. Like, we've got to solve against those constraints. Like, we need—
what a cool opportunity. Can you imagine that, like, just in the last few years, all we've really been talking about, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of stuff in the workplace, don't get me wrong, but it's really been open office plan, executive suites, hot desking, you know, paperless, and, you know, neighborhoods and things like that within office spaces. And it's just, what an amazing opportunity to reimagine what we need as humans, what the earth needs, from mitigating waste and all that stuff. So this is my last question, and I think I know what you're going to say, but what I like to ask this at the end, what is something that you're really kind of excited to see play out, or something maybe come to life that doesn't currently exist or we don't currently prioritize? What are you excited about to see coming down the pipeline?
Well, this may seem self-serving, but it's the mission statement we've had for 9 years. More happy people working in better spaces. The planet smiles.
I love it. Simple and effective.
And I think it's there's more agitation, there's more movement toward all three of those principles now than ever before. And so I think
Totally agree.
the patience that people like you and I have dreamt of a better world, a better space landscape, that unbridled hope that we've had, I think we should all be buckling up. Like getting exercise, eating well, clearing our brains, meditating a lot, because this is a moment. There's exciting, important work to be done.
I totally agree, and I think it's a beautiful time to be in the real estate industry, especially from like the tech slant that we come at it from.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope cheers to a better world. Yes, I think that it's a great time to take care of ourselves, connect with other people just from a human standpoint. I've been talking about this a lot, and I've been hearing it a lot. We are so used to just connecting with people for the sake of doing business and getting things done and being effective and productive. But if this is a moment to connect with each other as human beings and talk about ideas and exchange information and see what kind of creative things we can do, because we are totally reimagining the world as we knew it. So thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. What a nice way to spend a late afternoon on a Friday. So I hope you get to enjoy some outside time in your beautiful environment. And please share.
The snow has stopped.
What, the snow stopped? I forgot you said it was snowing. That's so crazy. You know, please share any resources or any of your recent blogs or anything that you want to share with folks in the comments. And people will be able to kind of rewatch this throughout the week and find you and the things that you are up to. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mark. And we'll see you guys all next week.
Stay well.